South Korea's defense ministry says Seoul and Washington have begun a week-long joint military exercise in the waters around the Korean peninsula amid high tensions over the DPRK's nuclear and missile program. Around 40 Navy vessels from both countries, including the nuclear-powered USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, are taking part. The DPRK called the drills a rehearsal for war. Tensions on the Korean peninsula have risen sharply in recent weeks following a series of weapons tests by Pyongyang. On Sunday, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said President Donald Trump had instructed him to continue diplomatic efforts to calm tensions with the DPRK.
Another round of joint military drills by South Korea and the US kicked off Monday in the waters both east and west of the peninsula. As many as 40 naval vessels from the two allies are involved in the exercises, including the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, which holds up to 70 aircraft from fighter jets to helicopters, and the 18,000-ton submarine USS Michigan packed with some 150 Tomahawk cruise missiles. South Korean attack helicopters, defense units, and warships such as the Sejong the Great Aegis-armed destroyer have also been deployed for the training exercise. In addition, the U.S. is using the Joint Surveillance Target Attack Radar system during the drills, monitoring North Korea's ground and naval movements up close. The U.S. Navy described the purpose of the operation as to check the allies' communications, interoperability, and partnership. However, there are concerns that Pyongyang may protest against the military exercise with additional provocations, as joint drills like these have antagonized the North in the past. The military remains on alert as officials from Seoul also raised the possibility of another missile launch from North Korea around the date of China's 19th National Congress of the Communist Party on October 18th. Pyongyang's latest threats included a nuclear test and a ballistic missile launch only a month ago. Last week, U.S. President Trump said that Washington is always open to negotiations when it comes to North Korea, but also will remain ready for other possibilities.
Members of the Trump administration are throwing their weight behind the president's strong words on North Korea. They say that while the administration wants a diplomatic solution, it also has full military options on standby. But Pyongyang, clinging onto its leverage, says its nuclear development is purely defensive. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster has reiterated President Trump's message to North Korea. McMaster said on Sunday that Trump will not permit Pyongyang and its leader Kim Jong-un to threaten the U.S. with nuclear weapons, adding that he has been very clear about this. He also stressed that Kim must recognize that developing a nuclear capability will not keep him safer, explaining it's actually the opposite. Another key cabinet member, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, said President Trump has given him the green light to continue his diplomatic efforts with North Korea, efforts that will continue until the first bomb drops. Tillerson added the U.S. has military preparations ready to go and has those military options on the table, adding the Trump team has spent substantial time perfecting them. The top U.S. envoy to the UN, Nikki Haley, cementing the administration's position, said that President Trump's decision to not recertify the nuclear deal with Iran sends a, quote, perfect message to North Korea. This following Trump's announcement that he would not recertify the 2015 multilateral deal under which Tehran agreed to curb its nuke program for sanctions relief. Haley said the U.S. president is trying to make sure Iran does not become the next North Korea, adding the message is that Washington will not engage in a bad deal. Against this backdrop, the deputy chairman of North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly, An Dong-chun, said as he addressed the Inter-Parliamentary Union Assembly in Russia that Washington leaves the regime with no other choice but to develop nuclear weapons. Russia's TASS news agency quoted An as saying the existence of North is at stake, especially as Trump has said the U.S. could totally destroy the country if necessary.
Speaking of North Korea, you talk about working with European allies. As you know, our European allies are very concerned about the step that President Trump took on Friday. I want to show you what the German foreign minister had to say. Quote, "My big concern is that what is happening in Iran, or with Iran from the U.S. perspective, will not remain an Iranian issue, but many others in the world will consider whether they themselves should acquire nuclear weapons too, given that such agreements are being destroyed." And I guess the question there is, as voiced by the German foreign minister, why should North Korea believe anything that the United States has to say if the president has shown his willingness to walk away from agreements about nuclear weapons?
I think what North Korea should take away from this decision is that the United States will expect a very demanding agreement with North Korea, one that is very binding and achieves the objectives not just of the United States, but the policy objectives of China and other neighbors in the region, a denuclearized Korean peninsula. We intend to be very demanding in that agreement. And if we achieve that, then there will be nothing to walk away from because the objective will be achieved. The issue with the Iran agreement is it does not achieve the objective. It simply postpones the achievement of that objective. And we feel that that is one of the weaknesses under the agreement. So we're going to stay in. We're going to work with our European partners and allies to see if we can't address these concerns, which are concerns of all of us.
Secretary Tillerson, you were in China. We were just talking about the North Korean problem. You were in China trying to resolve the dispute with North Korea in a diplomatic way. President Trump tweeted, "I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he is wasting his time trying to negotiate with Little Rocket Man." And then he sent a second tweet saying, "Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done." Now, if I were a Chinese official or a North Korean official seeing these tweets while you were there trying to negotiate and try to solve this problem, I might think Secretary Tillerson doesn't really speak for President Trump.
Well, fortunately, Jake, President Trump and President Xi have probably one of the closest relationships the president has with the head of state. As you're aware, they've had two major face-to-face meetings, the summit in Mar-a-Lago, a very comprehensive bilateral in Hamburg. The president speaks to President Xi on the telephone frequently. I think they've had 7 or 8 calls. I have a very close relationship with the state counselor of China who reports directly to President Xi on their foreign policy. So rest assured that the Chinese are not confused in any way what the American policy towards North Korea or what our actions and efforts are directed at.
But don't tweets like that undermine you?
Well, I think what the president's doing is he's trying to motivate action on a number of people's part, in particular the regime in North Korea. I think he does want to be clear with Kim Jong-un and that regime in North Korea that he has military preparations ready to go, and he has those military options on the table, and we have spent substantial time actually perfecting those. But be clear, the president has also made clear to me that he wants this solved diplomatically. He is not seeking to go to war.
So he doesn't think it's a waste of time?
But no, sir. He has made it clear to me to continue my diplomatic efforts, which we are, and we will, as I've told others, those diplomatic efforts will continue until the first bomb drops.
The relationship that a Secretary of State has with the president is one of the most important relationships in the world. World leaders need to know that you speak for him and that he has faith in you and that you have faith in him. NBC News reported that you were frustrated with President Trump over the summer and you called him a moron during a meeting at the Pentagon. Now, you've dismissed the question as petty, but this is literally one of the most important relationships in the world, the one between you and President Trump. Is it true? Did you call him a moron?
Jake, as I indicated earlier when I was asked about that, I'm not going to deal with that kind of petty stuff. I mean, this is a town that seems to relish gossip, rumor, innuendo, and they feed on it. They feed on one another in a very destructive way. I don't work that way. I don't deal that way, and I'm just not going to dignify the question. I call the president Mr. President. He and I have a very, very open, frank, and candid relationship. I see him often, speak to him nearly every day. I'm in the Oval Office a number of hours every week. We have a very open exchange of views on policy. At the end of the day, he makes decisions. I go out and do the best I can to execute those decisions successfully, and he understands at all times what we are trying to achieve to fully implement his foreign policy. He has assembled a very, I think, unconventional team. He himself is an unconventional president. He's assembled an unconventional cabinet. I'm an unconventional pick for Secretary of State. But that's because he does not accept the status quo with the many threats that we're confronting in the world today. And he is going to take forcing action. And oftentimes, the tweets or decisions he takes are intended to cause this forcing action to get off of the status quo, to force people to take action and move to a different place. So whether it's the decision on the Iranian agreement that was announced to force action to address this defective agreement, whether it's decisions on forcing North Korea to move to a different place of engagement, all of those are steps the president's taking to force action. He is not going to accept the status quo. The American people elected him to change the status quo, and that's what he's doing.
Ever since you called it petty, I've been thinking a lot about it because I'm a reflective guy, and I understand the media makes mistakes, and the media always could improve. But here's the thing. Either you didn't say it, in which case there are a whole bunch of administration officials telling the press and telling the president that you did, and that's a serious problem, or you did say it, and look, you're a serious guy. For you to say something like that suggests a real frustration with the commander-in-chief. So when you don't answer the question, it makes people think that you probably did say it. But either way, whatever happened, it is serious. So can you please clear it up?
As I said, Jake, I'm not playing. These are the games of Washington. These are the destructive games of this town. They're not helpful to anyone. And so my position on it is, I'm not playing. I'm not playing. You want to make a game out of it? I'm not playing.